Ethan, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for your time, seriously. And Ethan, first of all, was wondering, because you grew up in the 70s and 80s yourself, so you heard about all these murder stories from back then. And I was wondering, hearing about stories like that at such a young age, was that like a moment, when like the innocent feeling of an American childhood kind of disappeared in a way?
I wonder, um, I wonder, you know, I don't know if the world was ever as innocent as we think it was. We always remember our youth as kind of this idealized time, but I think every generation does get woken up to the realities of how tough life is at a certain moment. And there is, something about that time period where the myth of America broke down. I don't think the myth was ever real, but that certain groups of middle class communities were able to live this kind of idealized fantasy life. And then something terrible happens and it wakes you up that that's not the real world. And I love coming of age films, stories, and that this is a coming of age story set in the horror genre, which is different. There's a list of all the great coming of age films of all time, whether you're talking about Outsiders or 400 Blows, but there's that moment that you wake up to how complicated the world is and how there are dark forces, whether it's your parents, whether it's society, whether it's, culture, whether it's war or famine, all these things that happen to us as we become adults and how we wake up to it. And this movie, in a lot of ways, functions as a metaphor for that. These young people don't have anybody taking care of them, and they have to learn to take care of each other and themselves.
Right. And do you remember like a specific story you heard about that kind of made you like redefine the meaning of fear or even understand fear as an emotion?
I was so out to lunch as a kid. I mean, I swear, there were so many things I should have been scared of that I wasn't, and I was scared of things I shouldn't have been. Uh, I, we all have experiences where you realize that adults don't always have your best interest at heart. Some of us are lucky enough to have parents who are really loving, and you start to think that the world is just there to help nurture you. And then you get a rude wake-up call by life, with teachers or coaches or people who are not actually interested in helping you. And my brain tends not to focus on those people and
Right.
forget about them. But I know why you're asking the question, because it is, Mason is really going through something horrible in this movie that
Mhm.
wakes him up. I fortunately never had anything like that. Or if I did,
Thankfully.
I blacked it out.
Right. Even my last question to you would be like, because your character pretty much failed at becoming, a successful sorcerer in a way. And I was wondering whenever you had a moment like that, before your breakthrough, whenever you felt like you are failing at reaching your dreams and goals, how did you make sure you always get back on the horse?
What an interesting question. Um, Strangely, life is so mysterious that when I look back on the times that I felt I was suffering the most, with the benefit of hindsight, you see them as the periods of the most growth. When you're getting everything you want, it's very hard to grow.
Mhm.
And when I look back in my life and all the time periods that felt the most difficult, is the periods where I actually learned the most and I was the most alive. And I think the lesson there is that it it's the living that's really interesting, and the result of what happens is really not very success and failure, dumb words, because a lot of times when the world thinks you're succeeding, you're failing, and when a lot of times when the world thinks you're failing, you're really succeeding because you're growing so much. You know,
Yeah.
it's life is so much more mysterious than just winning and losing. It's so much more interesting than that.
Absolutely, 100% agree, Ethan. Seriously, thank you so much for your time today. All the
Thank you.
best for the movie and see you soon.
Yeah, I love all the movies behind you. Looks
Oh, yeah.
awesome.
And they're all from you.
Yeah, good. Keep it that way.